I'm not sure that Sam knows what he's walking into. If you have to educate the audience during a debate with right-wingers, you're losing. I know you love to debate, but please don't walk into an ambush like this ever again. What a timeline we live in, indeed. Wait a minute, did Sam already debate them? Yeah, this happened 6 days ago. I'm a little late to this, huh? I know Sam will agree to almost any debate, but he rarely debates YouTubers and streamers. Yeah, they called him out on a particular take he had.
You accused him of denying the existence of white supremacy.
But I'm gonna have to use that. What's the sitch?
KK, the racial motivations behind the Tulsa race massacre. You refer to him in the state of Oklahoma as propagating lost causism, which is the idea of casting slave owners as benevolent, downplaying the horrors of slavery, and saying the Civil War wasn't about slavery.
I'm not convinced that they understand the lost cause
Statement and the anti-CRT bill to being similar to the conditions that caused the Tulsa race massacre in the first place.
You thought Sam debated Adam and Sitch years ago? That it may have happened, but this was 6 days ago.
You referred to this anti-CRT legislation as upholding the Confederacy. You said he and the state were trying to remove the fact that the Tulsa race massacre was motivated by race and racism, and you all agreed to call him a white supremacist. So I guess what I'm confused...
Look, if your priority is making sure that white kids feel comfortable in history class, like over actually teaching history, you know what I mean? Is making sure that white kids don't internalize any sort of guilt in the understanding of history, we got a problem. If that's your priority, right?
The way I described it was, he said you can teach about historical incidences as long as you don't blame the behavior on immutable characteristics.
Okay, so what do you think he's talking about when he says blame the behavior of the Tulsa massacre?
He's saying...
So there's two ways that you can take this, right? Immutable characteristics. I mean, I get the feeling that this dude and you know, maybe even the zeitgeist, you know, around education in Oklahoma in general looks at the instruction of history, which, like I said, I don't think that the kind of stuff that they're saying, like the real heavy laying of the guilt of history at the feet of like white children, I don't think that really goes on. I think that's an exaggeration. I think that is a reaction to feeling uncomfortable, as one should, hearing about the history of the country and having that cognitive dissonance between like America is the great land of opportunity and freedom and tolerance and all this stuff, and then like, yeah, you're like, oh yeah, look at what happened in Tulsa in the early 1900s, right? It doesn't exactly jibe. What they're claiming is that they are outlawing a type of instruction in school which they're characterizing as saying that racism is an immutable characteristic of white people. I will be the first to tell you that, you know, the struggle against racism, which realistically speaking is the struggle against whiteness as like a cultural concept, right? A struggle to dislodge this kind of unconscious set of beliefs that comes with whiteness, right? With a social construction which defines itself by that which is not. Like it's literally defined by, you know, like this person is not white, this person is not white, this person is not white, and it's changed over the years, and you know, right? It's a difficult thing to deconstruct. It's a multi-generational project. But to say that it is, what was his exact words?
I can read you his direct thing if you want me to.
Yeah, just repeat what you had just told me in that setup.
Okay, well, what I told you was that he said, the way I described it was, he said you can teach about historical incidences as long as you don't blame the behavior on immutable characteristics.
Immutable characteristics, okay? So I don't think it's immutable, because if it was immutable, then there'd be, like, you know, it's like, that's like giving up, right? Obviously, the intention of teaching this history and taking unconscious concepts like whiteness and making them conscious, pointing them out, saying this is what's going on, like, you know, this is the elephant in the room, that's got to have a goal, and that goal is to unwind over, like I said, generations, unwind that racism, unwind what's really like, you know, kind of a white supremacist mentality that is unconsciously taught as a result of the history of you know, how it was used in the past, right? So yeah, immutable, no, I don't think so. But like you can see that Sam's not worried about literally that concept, right? Like the idea that you're not allowed to, Sam doesn't want teachers to say, yo, you got this racism, and if you're white, that's immutable, that's just part of, you know, who you are, that's like, you know, endemic to to you being you, right? But at the same time, you can see how they would take a concept like what I just described with like whiteness as a social construct and white supremacy as an unconscious belief that people are indoctrinated into, and say, well, that's what we're talking about right there. That's what you're not allowed to teach. Because to them, do you see how malleable like that phrase is, and why Sam would be worried about a rule like that, like basically preventing the multi-generational project of deconstructing whiteness, white supremacist mentality in the culture at large, right? This is literally a law that is trying to put a halt on that. The intention of this law, and I don't think I'm going on a limb out here by saying this, the intention of this law is to keep what is implicit, what is unconscious, right? And that does not allow us to move forward as a society. I think the parents like imagine their kids like being uncomfortable, and that's a sign that the parents are kind of uncomfortable, that they're feeling some kind of guilt, and that the way that they like I said, white guilt is like a reaction to this stuff, right? And it is cringe when it manifests as a white person centering themselves and their guilt and their feelings, in this concept that's really, it's about the victims of racism, not about the perpetrators of racism. So that's cringe. But the other types of reactions to white guilt are even worse, right? And the type that we're talking about here is denial. That was a long time ago. I have nothing to do with that. Right now in the United States, segregation is not the law of the land. Like there's no laws that say white person can do this, but black person can't do this, right? So therefore racism abolished. We don't have to think about it, right? It's all over. Martin Luther King got rid of all the racism, right? That we want to live in a colorblind society. That's denial, right? And that's actually a worse response to history than the kind of cringy white guilt that I just described.
Person says, how does teaching this incident not run afoul of the CRT or the anti-CRT legislation? And his answer is that he's saying that he would never teach a child that the child is inherently racist because of their skin color.
No, but that's not what he said. What he said was, will you just read the quote?
He said, I would never tell a kid that because of your race, because of the color of your skin or your gender or anything like that, that you are less of a person or inherently racist.
This guy literally thinks like that's reverse racism that he's describing. He literally thinks that like in teaching history, and in teaching the concept of implicit bias, that somehow what you're doing is actually being like racist against white people, right? That's that things have gone too far in the other. I mean, we've heard this before. We've heard it from Bosch. We've heard it from right wingers. It's an absurd and pernicious notion.
That doesn't
the
mean
next one about
doesn't mean you don't judge the actions of individuals. You can absolutely do that. Historically, you should. This was right. This was wrong. They did this for this reason. But to say it was inherent in that because of their skin is where I say that is critical race theory. You're saying that race defines a person. I reject that. So I would say to be judgmental of the issue, of the action, of the content, of the character, of the individual, absolutely. But let's not tie it into his skin color and say the skin color determines that.
Okay. So the idea that the Oklahoma massacre was simply a function of some bad individuals, to me, is absurd. It is contrary to historical context. I mean, let's be clear. The Oklahoma massacre was not the only massacre that took place in the post-Reconstruction years. There were dozens. There were political coups. There were assassinations. They were white people taking out black political people and black wealth. And the idea that this was simply a function of individuals, but not a function of an ideology that came out of in the wake of the Civil War is just, I'm sorry, it's ludicrous. And just the idea that this is going to be, you cannot consider the question of race, which I guess is the immutable characteristic that he's referring to, right? That race plays no part in white supremacy is a total denialism. I mean, and look, let me be clear. Like, I think white supremacy is a practice that we all largely in this society engage in, including black people. And because it's something that has been so ingrained into the society, into the fabric of our society, that it is.
Okay, so let me let you know what I'm thinking right now. I'm a little bit worried for Sam, right? He is on unfriendly terrain here. He's on enemy terrain. He's talking about stuff that likely Sitch and Adam's audience lack the basic competency to understand, because it's just like it's not really talked about, right? And things like what he just said, right, about the fact that like white supremacy is a concept that gets indoctrinated into people and not just white people, right? Take that out of context and imagine how that's going to sound. Imagine how that's going to be used. So what I'm worried about now is the kind of clips that are going to be made out of that. We talked earlier about taking people out of context, right? That is something that could very easily be taken out of context. And you know, you gotta ask yourself, why did Sitch and Adam bring Sam Seder on to have this conversation? Are they really concerned about the spread of misinformation, and they just want to have an honest conversation in good faith and find out where Sam's really coming from? Or are they doing this because Sam is hated by a certain part of the right wing? I mean, remember what happened with Emma? You remember what Tim Pool and his audience like tried to do to Emma?
It's almost like it's almost in many respects it's involuntary. There are, to be sure, there's a lot of white supremacy that is much more voluntary and much more you're aware of. We make choices every day that are a function of white supremacy, that are a function of white supremacy. The idea that the Oklahoma race massacres was not a function of the whiteness and the blackness of the people involved, I'm sorry, it's just, in my mind, it's complete denialism. Now, I don't know, I don't know, remember the exact context of the guy. I don't remember the guy whatsoever. And I'm, but that view.
You can hear Sam okay?
In my mind, is both a white supremacist view, which again, I believe that white supremacy is something that we can practice unconsciously.
Right.
And I believe that subscribing to that view is certainly.
Yeah, no, I would go one step further and say that as long as it's unconscious, it's something that we will perpetuate in our daily lives, right? The metaphor that Ask Vera and I came up with a long time ago was Agent Smith, right? The way that in the Matrix, anybody that's in the Matrix, like Agent Smith can just like come out of you, right? At any time, and you're just sitting there, you know, eating a sandwich or something like that, and all of a sudden like Neo's walking by and then Agent Smith comes out and you don't even realize what's happening, right? That's what we're talking about when we're talking about like sort of the unconscious processes behind white supremacy. And even more than that, it's kind of tied into the whiteness, right? So whether you think of yourself as racist or not, this stuff is operating. Think of it as like operating in the background of your OS, right?
What ultimately leads to more egregious acts of racism, and it also is. I think it is completely consistent with the impetus behind the Lost Cause. I think, frankly, the whole assault on CRT is also denial of systemic racism. I mean, it is also. I think like a fictionalized version of what CRT in fact is. And I would also say that like the goal of these laws is in my mind twofold. It is one.
Somebody needs to make a short video on what actual CRT, critical race theory, is and what it isn't, right? Because that'd be like an excellent resource to go to whenever anything like this comes up.
One, to make it so that people who would teach about questions of race to self-censor themselves, because these things are written in such a vague manner. And
only white people try to blame other racialized people for slavery.
And, particularly in the case of like Florida, where you have empowered people, and I think the Oklahoma law is modeled after this.
Yeah, racism is like bloatware or adware that you get pre-installed by your parents and society, kind of. Yeah, and so while I say I don't think it's like I don't think it's did they say endemic, or did they say God, there was some other word that they used there, right? Like I don't think it's like, it's not in your DNA, or it's not like biologically there, but it is present within, it is in fact ubiquitous within culture and society. And so it's going to be operating in the background regardless. But if you're aware that it's there, maybe you can do something about it. Maybe you can be conscious about it. Maybe you can, you know what I mean? Maybe you can take some precautions, or just, you know, like, it's more dangerous the more unconscious it is, right?
To empower people to sue
Immutable, yeah. I don't like the word immutable. It is ubiquitous, if that makes sense.
Going to err on the side of not bumping up against that law because it's so costly for them, and it's cheaper for them to avoid anything that is even remotely close to that. I mean, it's the same thing with abortion bans. That's why you have doctors saying, like, I'm not going to perform an abortion on an ectopic pregnancy because I'm not going to lose my license and go to jail. And so that type of ambiguity around the law is
10 out of 10. Wow.
It's not a bug, but rather a feature of that law. And then I would also say that on top of that being the purpose of the law.
Wait, I gotta rehear what Sam is saying.
I mean, it's the same thing with abortion bans. That's why you have doctors saying, like, I'm not going to perform an abortion on an ectopic pregnancy because I'm not going to lose my license. And
so Sam's talking about the vagueness of the language and how it allows for multiple interpretations, and how somebody that's subject to the law, in other words, a teacher, that I don't know what the law prescribes as far as, could you lose your ability to, could you lose your job, could you lose your teaching license, like, right? What would happen to you if you were found in violation? But when things are vague, generally it causes that sort of panopticon effect where you end up monitoring yourself.
Because of the effectiveness of the surveillance, the prisoners effectively guard themselves.
And just trying to make sure that you don't go anywhere close to whatever is illegal. The example from Ron DeSantis's Florida, right, is the school libraries, which got rid of just a ton of books because they didn't know exactly what would violate the homophobic legislation passed by DeSantis. So they end up, like, actually eliminating more stuff than is against the law, just because they don't even want to deal with that, right? Since it's written into the curriculum, it makes it so that you lose your license. Yeah. So in other words, there's this electric fence. You don't know exactly where the electric fence is placed, so you don't go anywhere near that electric fence, right? Just to make sure that it's not going to zap you
and go to jail. And so that type of ambiguity around the law is not a bug, but rather a feature of that law. And then I would also say that on top of that being the
so they're going to bend the Bible. They actually did, I think, in Utah, right? They wrote the law so vaguely that it ended up like there was stuff in the Bible that violated the law.
Purpose of the law, it is, and I think we're seeing this in Florida, which has been the pioneer in this stuff, that the next step is a beginning to proffer more.
You're talking about Hinkle?
I would say the racism denial.
I mean, for a long time, like, Hinkle was like writing shotgun for Haas, for infrared Haas, right? He's
denial, like in the form of
all up in that Nazgul vortex.
The attempt to rewrite the curriculum to say that
now they're going to try to ban the Book of Mormon. Nice.
Provided personal benefits for the enslaved. So yeah, I mean, I don't remember the specifics of the video you're talking about, but largely based on his comments, regardless of what he's saying to mitigate that, I think that his
Yo, you gotta love this chat. There's somebody named Trigger Warning in here. Trigger warning, you little snowflake. Are you gonna get triggered? So I had to do my Reddit
understanding
voice.
of both that law and of the Oklahoma massacre.
What do you think about my Reddit voice, chat?
Is completely consistent with white supremacy.
I think you misinterpret.
Oh,
what
you're
he was
right.
saying.
Yeah, the Bible has that story with Noah and his daughters. Yeah.
Because
I think
he
you
wasn't
misinterpret
saying-
what he's saying. We're having a disagreement about
Right.
his
Well,
interpretation.
I understand. Okay. Well, we'll see. Because that, like, you can't teach that the Tulsa Race Massacre was motivated by racism or animosity towards black people because of the color of your skin. That you are less of a person or inherently racist. Now you can disagree with how he defines CRT, but in the anti-CRT bill, it says specifically that you can't teach that someone is inherently racist because of their skin color. And so he's saying that's the element that you shouldn't teach.
But if you're dealing with a chud judge, as you likely are, right? Because the judiciary is one of the anti-majoritarian functions of the U.S. government that the right wing uses to kind of sink their claws into the country as it's demographically changing, as they're becoming less popular, less successful electorally, right? They still have they still hold on to the judiciary, because the judiciary is somewhat of a lagging indicator, right? So you get that chud judge in there, and he's going to see, any sort of meaningful teaching of history as being an implication that that white kids are bad because of being white, or you know what I mean? You gotta realize that you got the law as it's written, and then you got the law as it's interpreted, right? You got the law as like Sitch is trying to interpret it now to make it look like less pernicious, and you got the way that the law would be interpreted under that chud judge.
I'm not saying you can't teach that the people involved in the Tulsa Race Massacre were motivated by racism.
Can you put up his full quote? Because I wasn't responding to that part, obviously. I was responding to the second half that you said something like that the events were not a function of some immutable characteristics.
He said, I would never tell the kid that because of your race, because of the color of your skin or your gender or anything like that you were less of a person or inherently racist. That doesn't mean that you don't judge the actions of individuals. You can absolutely do that. Historically, you should. This was right, this was wrong, they did this for this reason. But to say it was inherent, this is where I see it's key. But to say it was inherent in that because of their skin is where I say that is critical race theory.
Oh, I was just checking. Yeah, that's not my police siren. I think it's either Adam's or Sitch's.
I'll tell you that had those people who
I love it, Ubafly, a chudge.
committed the wealthy neighborhood, the black wealthy neighborhood in Oklahoma, had they been black, they would not have done that. I think we can all agree on that, right?
Sam, I don't think either one of us are disputing that those people were racist as fuck, and that we should be able to teach that.
Yo, like, do you where do you get that? Like, Sam thought that you were disputing that the perpetrators of the Tulsa massacre were racist, right? If you haven't liked the stream already, hit that button. It's one of the ways that YouTube lets you directly help me.
The thing is, though,
in fact, like the only one way, other than just watching my stuff.
If people are saying because those people were racist in the past that you are in fact racist, or that any particular race is inherently racist as some sort of biological determinism, that's the problem.
Well, first off, I don't think CRT in any way whatsoever teaches that.
Well, it kind of does, but we can talk about something else.
but not really. No, actually, no.
That's what you meant when you said we're all engaged in white supremacy, because the idea is that since our society was set up,
that's actually not critical race theories either. Critical race theories is that there are institutions and functions of society that are set up that are a function of racism, in the sense that there's diminished. So, for example, it is statistically far more likely that your neighborhood, if you are black, will be 10 to 20 degrees hotter in the summer, in the peak of the summer.
Now, maybe somebody in chat knows more about this. Sam doesn't really go into detail about this, temperature difference, right? But yeah, what he was saying essentially is that racism is enmeshed in the institutions of daily life in a way where it doesn't have to be explicit. It doesn't have to be written down. In other words, you don't need to write an order for the cops to say, hey, I kind of want you to pull over more black people, right? By the very nature of that institution of police, right? By the way that it was formed, by the way that it's always run, by the people that are in it, and the people that they choose to be there, to hire on, right? They're going to do that, right? So that's a great example of what CRT is being aware of the institutional bias of institutions like, the police is probably the best example I could find, right? And then taking that into account and look, CRT, we're talking about a course in law school, okay? That's where it's applicable. If you take critical race theory in law school, you're going to learn about some of the ways that racism is enacted, not in law, not because it's written down, not because that's the official, not because this is in the police manual, but it's just the nature of the institution that it's going to be like this. And so if you're trying to undo that, the first step is to be conscious of that. That's what CRT is, right? And they have made it sound like, yo, your kids aren't going to social studies class. They're going to critical race theory class. They're going to learn about critical race theory, right? These people don't even know what critical race theory is, but they're essentially using it as like a stalking horse. Is that what the name of it? I think it's called a stalking horse for any class that might actually go over the concept of racism, like the existence of racism historically, and how that sort of manifests in the current day, right? So Lance's debate partner was Matt Bender. Wait, when was this? In what debate? Police, armed forces. Yeah. There we go. Monetary system, credit system. That's a big one. White people are allowed to live in nice neighborhoods. They have shade trees, aren't exposed to the elements. Okay, so essentially we're talking about like neighborhoods where people live, and not because there's like a law that says you have to live here and you can't live here or anything like that, but just the dispossession of certain people of the resources to be able to live there, and kind of the history of concepts like redlining.
Summer. Now, do you know why that is? Well, if you were black, there would be.
Oh, it was Bender and Lance. Interesting. Versus Adam and Sitch. I never saw that. I mean, like,
it would be significantly more likely that your neighborhood is actually hotter.
The question though is and that
the reason, and the reason is because there are less trees that are planted.
Okay, so he does explain it.
In urban areas, there are less trees planted in neighborhoods where there are black people.
Education's another example of an institution which enacts racism without having it codified in the policy, right? When you talk about the way that schools are funded according to neighborhoods and where people live, being a function of history, which includes redlining as well as dispossession and the way that certain groups don't have the generational wealth of other groups to be able to move into neighborhoods like that, or if they do, might not be accepted. And there's no law that says like don't accept a person who looks like this, but it just kind of happens, right? It's just kind of
fact. And the reason why that is because there's less political power and less money in those neighborhoods. This is just a fact. I mean, this is a measurable fact.
I think we should stick to the point that we want. Okay, we should stick to the point of the bill, because I don't dispute any. I don't dispute anything.
Wait, stop. Okay, we could have a protracted conversation. Maybe we would in the future. I'd be interested to have this about what CRT is, because I've actually read way too much about CRT and read too much academic literature on CRT. But instead of debating that, the thing that I want to talk about with this is that
you have, right? It really doesn't show, Sitch.
You can disagree with Oklahoma or this guy's interpretation of how they define CRT. But that would be different than saying, well, they're claiming you can't teach that the Tulsa Race Massacre was motivated by racists, which when I'm looking at his words, he's not saying that. And when I look at the law, it doesn't appear to say anything like that either.
I mean, in the words that you just said to me, that this actions was not a function of an immutable characteristic, that to me says these people did not attack that neighborhood in Oklahoma because the people were black. And these people did not attack and the attackers did not do so.
There's a confusion. There's a confusion going on here, Sam. You're talking about the immutable characteristics of the blacks, but I think he's talking about the immutable characteristics of the whites.
Oh no, you're adding detail to our view that our viewers don't want to hear. Let's go back to our narrow area of acceptable discourse. Yeah, essentially this is an ambush, and I think that's what Sam doesn't realize. I'm a little bit worried that Sam might not even be aware of the nature of these two creators that he's dealing with, right? Part of the whole IDW game is to represent yourself as far to the left as you possibly can, right? You look at Tim Pool. In the beginning, he said, I'm a liberal. Now he says, I'm a centrist, right? You look at Jordan Peterson, a classical liberal, Sargon of Akkad, right? Part of the whole game of it is to set yourself up and be like, now I'm pretty liberal myself, but this wokeness has gone too far, and if even a liberal like me is bothered by the wokeness, you know it's out of control, right? That's part of their game. That's part of the way they move the Overton window. They claim an ideology that's further to the left than they really are. And if you're Sam Seder and you're busy doing like, I don't know how many hours of show a week, but this guy works hard, right? This guy, he's always at it. I think he takes like Thursday off and that's it, you know, 4 days a week. Other than that, like I'm just a little bit worried that maybe he doesn't know what he's stepping into here.
So if you're saying that the people who attacked have an immutable characteristic of racism and that's why they attacked, you are also saying that people today who are white have this same immutable characteristic of being racist. That's the problem.
I think that attack would not have happened if those attackers were not white.
So do you think white people have an immutable characteristic of racism?
Within the context of our society? Yeah, I think that there is. Well, I don't know that is. I think, no, the question isn't whether the racism is immutable. The question is whether the whiteness is immutable.
Well, what is
in the
whiteness?
sense that, well, in the sense that, I mean,
okay, so now you're on a right-wing show talking about whiteness, right? And I will guarantee you 95% of the audience takes that to mean phenotype, right? That's what they think whiteness is, right? There's a whole bunch of background to understand, you know, the social construction, which is what Sam's talking about, that they don't have, right? And like, you know, then you got to ask yourself, like, what's your goal with going in here? You know, do you want to shine a little light into the darkness? Do you want to, like, you know, change some minds? You're changing, you know, hearts and minds here. Are you, you know, are you entertaining your audience? Because it doesn't look like it's being streamed on the Majority Report, right? So it's not really for the consumption of Sam's own audience. What's the goal here? Because if you're talking to people about subjects that they don't have like the basic understanding to be able to, you know, put into meaning, then, you know, you're setting yourself up to get used, essentially.
I'm using the way that this guy is talking about it, because I don't believe that this guy thinks that race is a social construct. I mean, I'm talking about the way that he is using.
Yeah, Sam, like you're right, Crystal. Sam is a great debater. Sam is actually so vicious in debates that he always tells stories of Michael Brooks kind of trying to hold him back, both in the Tim Pool debate and in the you know, where Matt was like, oh God, the way that Sam went in on Tim Pool, it was not pretty, right? And in terms of even Jimmy Dore, right? Matt's like texting Sam, being like, don't go for the neck, Sam, don't go for the neck, because Sam is absolute, like, he is a debate beast, you know what I mean? Like, he loves it, he revels in it, he lives for it. You know, give him a libertarian and like he will chew on them for hours and hours, right?
In this context, he is talking about.
But yeah, I do worry that he's walking into something that he doesn't fully understand, and that's part of their game plan too. That's why they put themselves forward like this. Part of it is to cause confusion.
Race. When he says a mutable characteristic is race, and I would say that yes, I think that it is inherent in our society. And like I say, I think both black and white people share in some function of white supremacy. But I think the whiteness of those people was the primary motivating factor in their attacking.
What do you mean by whiteness? How are you defining whiteness?
In the context of people.
So yeah, this is when I get to put in my expertise about debates, right? Debate time is not teaching time. Debate cannot be used for instruction. It just doesn't work like that, right? If you want people to learn something, it can't be in the midst of, like, you know, a person versus person, or in this case, person versus two-person conflict, right? It's just not, like, because like the people that you're debating have no interest in their audience understanding the concept that you're now like, you know, through him asking, like, trying to teach about, like, right? If their audience starts to understand that concept, that's bad for them, right? So yeah, I mean, this is one thing that debate is not good for. It's not good for learning. It's not good for new concepts, right?
1921.
Yeah, what their
debate is for dunking, true.
By whiteness.
Well, no, not in the. I think the key thing is, to be clear, you don't believe. I'm assuming you don't believe that, not like whiteness, like what does whiteness mean? But you don't believe that just because someone is white, that means that they're inherently racist, right?
No, I don't think. Well, I mean, look, I happen to think, no, not inherently. I mean, I'm not sure what you mean by necessarily inherently.
It's an immutable characteristic that you're born with, in the same way that you're born with skin color.
Well, you're saying no, that racism is an immutable characteristic,
Right.
and I'm not saying that.
Okay,
I know. That's what I'm trying to clear up.
I'm not saying that racism is immutable.
Right.
I mean,
that's what the guy who's responding to this is. That's what he's talking about. He's saying that you
say-
can't teach that
read-
racism
read-
is immutable.
read the quote back to me again, please.
I would never tell a kid that because of your race,
No,
because
I
of
know
the
that
color
part,
of your
but
skin.
go
Well, wait,
to
but
where
do
he's
you
talking about
understand-
the Oklahoma.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Do you understand
what
the
he's
first sentence is saying what I'm saying?
that that the color of your skin dictates whether you are racist or not?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think that's a helpful thing to teach people.
No, but you understand. I understand, but you understand that that's what he's saying in the first sentence, right?
I believe so. But
Okay,
let's go.
so I'll help you out, Sam. The correct answer is that nobody's actually teaching that. And the fact that he's saying this, it shows him to be bad faith. The Oklahoma administrator I'm talking about, right? Like this, it's a straw man. It's a straw man. There we go.
I mean, can you pop up the quote on the screen?
I can send it to Adam. I guess.
Yes.
I don't know how to do this.
Can you put it in like some type of chat or something?
Yeah, put it in the side chat.
Yeah, actually, yeah, I can just copy and
But
paste it.
I would also say, like, and I'm happy to continue to have this conversation, but the idea that we could be talking about this for 25 minutes and you say that it's
Do we have bottom haters in chat? I hope not. God, they would hate me.
misinformation, when it's clearly like we have different interpretations
No,
of what this guy said.
The beginning of the clip is crystal clear, though, Sam. It's
I don't
undeniable
agree.
what he's saying. So, Sitch, do you have the transcript from the beginning of the video?
I've literally been denying.
It's undeniable, Sam. I've literally been denying it. I don't know what you're talking about.
20 minutes, and now you're telling me it's undeniable.
Well, but
He does have
it's
instincts. He does have
deniable
instincts.
in the portion of the clip that you played, obviously, because that portion of the clip is kind of, you can interpret multiple different ways. But in the beginning of the clip, when the guy first asked the question, he says specifically that you can teach the Tulsa race riot, you can teach about slavery, you can teach about slavery being the worst thing ever.
Okay, but to say it was inherent in that because of their skin.
Yeah, you can do all that stuff. You just can't relate it to the here and now. You have to pretend that racism is a problem that got solved back in the 60s, right? And you got to pretend that if it's not on the law books, if it's not in the policy books, then it doesn't exist. There's no institutional reservoir of racism, and it can't be in the culture either. So in other words, you couldn't have possibly been indoctrinated into this and be a vessel, of Agent Smith or racism without realizing it, right? That is profoundly unhelpful, right? That is a law that says we are not going to move forward on this, right? We're going to pretend that the only real racism is like the racism that puts on a Klan outfit and marches down the street and burns crosses and, stomps around in Doc Martens with red laces. You know what I mean? That's the only real racism. Anything else is totally above board. And, it's racist of you to point it out. It's not helpful. It's not helpful.
Is where I say that is critical race theory. You're saying that race defines a person. I reject that. So I would say, okay. Okay, I'm sorry. Now, which part did we play?
That's the part you played.
This whole thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have the beginning
I have
context?
the part that you didn't. Yeah, I can.
Yeah, bring that up.
Okay.
That's the
Thank
part
you.
that's undeniable.
You can't accuse me of using one part of what he says and generalizing on that, and then saying that because he said something that
This is causing more confusion. I'm sorry, Jello. You don't have to worry about the top of the hour or the bottom of the hour ad break. All you have to worry about is hitting that like.
mitigates that, then
Since you're on YouTube.
that is the one that is
Well,
holding.
but as a
I'm suggesting
But yes, I agree. Twitch is very confusing.
the whole question of whether this guy is fudging around the genuine implications of that Oklahoma attack
Look, if
on
he's
black wealth.
If he's
is-
fudging around, Sam, that's totally within your realm to call him out for. But if there are two clips, if there's a clip that you can interpret the way that you interpret it, and then there's another clip where it's crystal clear that your interpretation is incorrect, as a journalist, don't you owe it to your audience
Well,
to basically correct the record?
I mean, someone asked me last night if I consider myself a journalist, and I don't really. I think there are sometimes I do journalism when I interview people, but in the main, no, I'm not. I do a podcast and a YouTube.
Well,
But anyways, that's not the point.
we get
Let me
accused.
read this. Okay, which of these three clips here that you posted here was the ones that we talked about?
So this segment is called Please Define Whiteness, right? And I'm not sure if that's going to happen. And also, like I said, oh, you found it. Thank you, Natalie. Like I said, debate time is not didactic. Didactic is a fancy word for like, you know, educational, right? You know, it's not the time to be educating people on concepts that they might not be familiar with. Because, right, when most conservatives hear this word whiteness, they are thinking about a phenotype, right? They are thinking about a hue to skin, right?
So the first thing that I posted
that is not what Sam means by whiteness.
Okay, so thank you. I'm sorry to address that part. I would never tell a kid that because of your race, because of the color of your skin or your gender, anything like that, that you're less of a person or inherently racist. That's very good of him. That doesn't mean you don't judge the actions of individuals. Now, to look at the Oklahoma race riot as an action of individuals is to fundamentally miss the key dynamic that's going on there. This was not just random individuals. They were organizing around a principle.
But nobody's
we're not going to allow Black people to accrue wealth and political power. That's what they're doing.
That's what they're
doing. And they are saying, and let's be clear, they are saying Black people as distinct from them as white people.
Like I said, he says in the very beginning that you can teach the darker parts of American history, that America has these racist
But
roots.
then he is literally, his whole argument is that doesn't mean you don't judge the actions of individuals. And the point is,
this is where I think
even the way that they're phrasing this, the darker parts of American history, like, right, the few moments, rare though they may be, when America as a nation did not act in an exemplary manner. And there might have been a little bit of racism that happened. There might have been some violence along those racist lines. You know, like acting like this is the exception and not the rule is kind of wild. I don't know.
The misconfusion is coming from. So the guy asked the question.
Par for the course when you're dealing with right-wingers.
The Tulsa Race Massacre without running afoul of the CRT bill. That's the context. In the first answer, you know, he says you can teach all about the Tulsa Race Massacre, the good, bad, the ugly, blah, 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 blah. And the guy asked again. He says, follow up, how does this not run afoul of the CRT bill? And that's why he says, oh, I'm sorry to address that. And so when he says, I would never tell a kid because of the color of his skin, that is the part that runs afoul of the CRT bill, is teaching that concept. And he's saying that you can teach the Tulsa Race Massacre without teaching that specific concept, and that's why it doesn't run afoul of the CRT bill. That's the context of this interaction.
Sam's trying to have a conversation about actually the concept of whiteness here, right? And he's on a right-wing stream, right, with an audience that just does not have the foundation to understand even what's meant by that, right? So this is kind of a bad scene here, right? This all started from a clip of Sam talking about the Tulsa massacre, talking about, like, you know, the destruction of Black Wall Street, right? And talking about what a Oklahoma educational official said about, you know, what can and can't be taught in Oklahoma classrooms, right, in terms of you know, history of racism. But like I said, Sam's a great debater. He's got great instincts. He's a happy warrior. He enjoys the drama. He enjoys the chaos, right? He's always having to have people, like back in the day it would have been Michael Brooks, to tell him, like, don't always go for the jugular, because, like, his instinct, he's kind of got the killer instinct. So, you know, I mean, he's good at what he's doing right here. But we're talking about, like, you know, the few times that we've seen him not perform well in a debate scenario is when he's walking into a situation that he doesn't completely understand with creators that he doesn't exactly know where they're coming from. This has happened once before with Jackson Hinkle, and we're kind of seeing this happen again with Sitch and Adam, potentially. I think Destiny used to take the approach of just dunking on his debates opponents, but lately he's we've been more empathic. Wow. You know, when I talked to him, he just played the piano and ignored what I was saying. So,
ring of some sort of white supremacist diatribe, what Sitch just read. Because to me, it seems crystal clear that he's saying, look, America did not live up to their ideals.
Listen,
America has failed in the past.
You want me to concede to see this the way that you see it.
Well, no, I want to see how you see it.
I'm explaining to you exactly. If I look at one interaction during the Tulsa Race Massacre.
You know what time it is? It's time for Void Coffee.
One individual attacking one other individual. I don't get a full picture of what's going on there.
None of that is in what he said, though.
Excuse me. I'm trying to explain to you what is wrong with it. He says it doesn't mean you don't judge the actions of individuals. To look at the Tulsa Race Massacre as actions of individuals, okay, as opposed to as a part of a broader systemic move to deny a class of people, Black people, power and money in Oklahoma City. And then to not see that in the context of what was happening in post-Reconstruction America, where you had 6 million members of the KKK, particularly in that decade, where you had the revving up of—
Oh my God, Medplay, you're reminding me of a video that I need to get done for you. Yeah, I kind of got halfway done with this video and I realized I wanted to make it even more better. What's up, Cat? I don't know, he could probably give a brief explanation about how whiteness is meant to exclude by talking about how the definition has changed really quick. Like he could, but like in general, you're talking to an audience that's not receptive. They're gonna say he's rambling. They're going to tune out, right? You know, this is a right-wing audience. It's not I mean, based on the creators, I would say it's like not like a right-wing MAGA audience, right? It's more like an intellectual dark web, you know, kind of audience, right? And I think that might be what confused Sam about like what exactly he's walking into. But yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying, you know, I mean, like it can be taught. Generally, a debate is not the, oh my God, yo, this chat is gross. I'm sorry, I gotta never look at the chat, never look at the chat.
Jim Crow laws, where you had a series of mass—
Sam is sending these two back to school. Yeah, but I mean, like, just remember, like, the problem with this is the audience here is literally their audience. This isn't going off on MR. This isn't a piece of Sam's content. Like, this is a discussion that Sam's having with these two, and you got to ask yourself, you know, what is your purpose? What is your goal? What are you going for, right? And I don't know, at this point, I don't know what good could come out of this, but
like this.
Like I said, Sam loves debating, and you know, give him a chance and he'll go for it. I don't like seeing him feeling like he's walking into a trap. If he says Irish people weren't considered, yeah, like I mean, there might be some way to do that. It's just like you generally aren't given the time and space to educate in a debate. And you saw what happened when I tried to talk to Destiny, right? No, you didn't. You might not have seen. I've taken that video down mainly because I'm not really trying to attract that particular audience anymore, right? And having a debate with Destiny is a great way to get that kind of audience, right? But, you know, I just wanted to talk to him about, like, you know, he's all been out of shape about cancel culture. Oh my God, Demon Mama's gonna get me canceled. Demon Mama's gonna say I'm transphobic, and then somebody's gonna think I'm a horrible person, and I'm gonna lose a sponsorship. Oh, we gotta stop this. Like, you know, she's the worst person in the world, right? And I'm trying to talk to him about the like the actual concept that he's talking about sounds a lot more like the scapegoating and exclusion that marginalized people have been subject to throughout the years, right? And like be like, okay, you know, if you're really worried about cancel culture, maybe think about us, right? Because like as far as scapegoating and inclusion and exclusion, it's the kind of thing that more likely happens to marginalized groups rather than someone like you know, like Steven, right? But like his response was literally like, she is rambling, let me go play the piano, right? So I mean, like, do you think I, you know, taught Destiny anything? Obviously not. Did somebody in his audience learn something? I don't think so, right? I probably didn't do a lot of good in that debate, you know, because I tried to teach during a debate, you know, and I didn't even want it to be a debate. I just wanted to kind of like add on to like, well, if you're concerned about cancel culture, you know, maybe think about the real victims of actual cancel culture rather than this like ephemeral idea that you're gonna somehow like honestly, like Destiny doesn't have that much to worry about. I, on the other hand, got shit canned for real. For what? For doing what? For standing up for trans rights. Yeah. So, yeah.
To dispossess Black people of political power, to focus on—
You saw me debate with Destiny.
The individual is to deny what was going on during that entire era. And then to deny what was going on in that entire era is also to deny the larger context of American history. And that is why I compared it to the lost cause, because it is a denial of— But
I mean, do you understand, like, Jello, have you seen people get absolutely like destroyed for disagreeing with Destiny or Vosh or whoever? I mean, have you seen the Professor Flowers debate? Can you understand maybe why I might be a little bit cautious in having a conversation like that how the stakes might be elevated for a person like me?
Of history.
He says specifically, though, that's teaching the good, the bad, and the ugly, that we've made mistakes in the past. He says that specifically.
But I'm sorry, the idea of the Oklahoma—
Who's this we? We've made mistakes in the past? Because, you know, you'd think that we would be like the American people, but you're talking about a group of American people being victimized by another group, right? So who's what do you mean by we?
Oklahoma race massacre being a mistake, as opposed to literally a campaign that was across many parts of the country
you don't
dispossess a class of people from
and to be honest, I really wasn't trying to debate Destiny. I just thought that maybe I could reach him. Like, I mean, that was my approach early on, right? With larger creators, like that, like, you know, I really took them seriously when they said that, you know, they were open to an argument, they were open to a debate, they were open to learning, right? And you know, I tried to kind of provide like what was missing, and it turns out there just really isn't any interest for them. They want to weaponize their privilege. They rely on that weaponization of privilege. And so when you try to talk to them about, you know, maybe taking, you know, less privileged people into consideration, it is just like, you know, you're knocking on a locked door there. Like, right, there's
political power is, I'm sorry, is like
mistake is not strong enough a word. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's not just
you would classify it as a mistake, though.
In the Oklahoma
Jello, I wish I could have been more straightforward as well, right?
History guidelines. It says to teach everything you're talking about. It says to teach about the rise of black towns. It says to teach about the rise of the Ku Klux Klan. It says to teach about the emergence of Black Wall Street and the Tulsa race massacre. It says to teach about
what does it tell that you cannot read me the
and you can see how I changed my strategy, you know, post that, right? I thought that maybe I could find allies that were interested in learning, and instead what I found was hostility, and the idea that the only value I had to these people is the you know, rubber stamp that I could give to them of saying, this guy's okay, this guy's not transphobic, this guy's doing right by us trans people. That's all they were interested in, right? And so where does that put me, right? The only logical position I can take at that point is opposition. But I hope that people understand it's not like a you know, reactive, knee-jerk kind of opposition. It's not an angry, vengeful sort of opposition. It is a tactical, necessary opposition to people that are harming us, maybe without realizing that they're doing so.
The Oklahoma law.
Which the anti-CRT thing?
Yeah.
Says no teacher or administrator or other employee or school district charter, school or virtual school charter should require to make part of the course the following concepts. Number 1, race or sex is inherently superior to another race or sex. Number 2, that an individual by virtue of his race or sex is inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive, whether consciously or unconsciously. Number 3.
You didn't understand it until I was summarized it just now. Well, I mean, like, I don't know, Destiny, like, you know, maybe it was it depends on where you're paying attention to Destiny's beautiful piano playing or what I was saying, right?
3, an individual should be discriminated against or receive adverse treatment solely or partially because of his or her race or sex. Number 4, members of one race or sex cannot and should not attempt to treat others without respect to race or sex. Number 5, an individual's moral character is necessarily determined by his race or sex. Number 6, an individual by virtue of his race or sex bears responsibility for actions committed in the past by other members of the same race or sex. Number 7, an individual should...
Do you see that? Like, right? I mean, look, okay. Let me see if I can help here. An individual should not be made to feel that they bear responsibility for acts perpetrated by members of their age, or what do they say? Something race or sex, right? So, at no point in my education did a teacher ever do that, right? And I've had all kinds of teachers, right, in terms of, you know, their own, like, background, right? Nobody ever put that on me. But there were times when I took what was said as an attack, as a placement of guilt upon me, right? I gotta be honest, though, that was in my mind. That wasn't anything that they said, right? That was my own reaction. That was my own fragility that did that, right? That you know, that's white fragility.
Feel discomfort, guilt,
Wait,
anguish,
I'm
or
sorry,
any other
would you
form.
read that last one for me again?
Any individual by virtue of his or her race or sex bears responsibility for actions committed in the past by other members of the same race or sex.
Do you disagree? Do you disagree with that, Sam?
No, I was curious about...
Like, what they're saying would be like, you know, if you sat down and your teacher was like, all right, now listen here. You white people in the class, all right? This is what happened in history. It was done by people like you. You did it, right? You know, this is your fault. Nobody says that. That doesn't really happen, except for in our own, like, you know, mental processes of white fragility. Like, that's where that takes place. That's imaginary. That is 100% imaginary.
The wording. I mean, let's be clear. Like, in practice, a lot of this wording can be interpreted in a myriad of ways.
Sure,
right?
language is that way. Yeah.
On its face, though, this would all be totally acceptable if it was passed in like the 1960s, right? This would all be like hailed as a civil rights victory in the 1960s.
Yes.
There we go. Everything was solved in the 60s, right? Everything was solved in the 60s. You know, that was they got rid of segregation, they got rid of Jim Crow, they passed the Civil Rights Act, and everything was peachy keen. So thereby, if you're going by that mentality, then any attempt to work on racism, it is inherently, I guess, like racist against white people, because everything was made perfect in the 60s. That is that is an absurdly naive point of view for like a professional commentator, right? But hey, the right wing, these kind of audiences, they'll let you get away with it, right?
At a time prior to the Civil Rights Act, real victory.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Of course.
Right. Yes. But we're 60 years out from the and there is a resurgence of an attempt to sort of like a neo-Confederate resurgence in this country.
But what is the problem with
You're gonna get clipped, Sam. You're gonna get clipped.
any of the language that?
Well, I mean, you can continue.
I mean, these people think that that's ridiculous, right? They don't see it.
Continue to read some of the law, but I think like the idea that someone is that to say that white people.
You're wondering about Adam and Stitch's ideology? I mean, I would say the best characterization is intellectual dark web, right? You know, the kind of people that are like, oh, I'm a liberal, but like the left is crazy. Intellectual dark web is like a false claim of centrism in order to kind of work the refs of the Overton window, if that makes sense, right? You put yourself as far to the left as you can justify, right? And then you say some right wing shit. That's what we're dealing with.
People have unconscious, and I would argue that it's not exclusive to white people. I think that there's a
Sitch lives in Florida. I didn't know that.
Practice of white supremacy amongst black people as well. But to say that it is because of our whiteness that we don't have that we have unconscious biases, or we could have unconscious biases, and I believe under that law there is a real question as to
devil's advocate, centrist, that kind of fits.
Whether I could say that,
right? So, just to be clear, they're not MAGA, right? They're not MAGA chuds, and I don't even get the feeling that, at least in Adam's case, that he's particularly like libertarian.
I understand if in a public school, you say, okay, in history class and things of this nature, we shouldn't be teaching that people possibly have unconscious biases, which is a contested topic.
Social studies class.
I think it's totally fine if parents don't want to teach the idea.
It's a contested topic. It's a contested subject. It's a contested idea that there might be an unconscious bias.
That people have these unconscious biases. I think it's totally fine in a public school. And to me, it takes like a very far jump to go from you can't teach that people have unconscious biases to this is the rise of like the neo-Confederacy.
Well, I think passing laws to say that we can't teach that we have unconscious biases is, I think that is I don't think it's it's controversial idea like climate change or the spherical Earth or the heliocentric theory of the solar system. I don't think it has the exact same implications, but it is the exact same dynamic. It's the same impetus. It's just like, you're not able, it's like when Lee Atwater said with the Southern strategy, we can no longer after the Civil Rights Act, we can no longer use the N-word. So we say busing.
Sam is unhinged. Oh my God. Yeah, like, see, I don't see what you're accomplishing by going on here. Look, I don't know. He loves to debate, so.
you can't use the N-word, so we say raise taxes.
You're not one of those sun orbiter people, are you?
I mean,
Sam, do you disagree with the part of the law that states that you can't say that people have immutable characteristics? Because I mean, for me, that is textbook racism, to teach that, you know, someone has some kind of behavior specifically because they're a certain race or religion or anything seems like textbook racism to me. And the law specifically, I think, is against that.
But why make a law against something that's not happening in school? Because that's literally not happening. That nobody's teaching that anywhere, right? You only have a law like that if you mean something a little bit different than literally what you said, right? If you're going to expand that definition to talking about the, you know, discussions of implicit bias, you know, they are a form of putting an immutable characteristic on a group, in this case white people, right? That's
I mean, I don't know which provision of the law you're talking about.
Same
sure
like the
provisions of that law that
same as the "Don't Say Gay" bill. Yeah,
I have no issue with, and I would suggest that they're probably in there, you know, as a way of getting the parts that are really problematic. Like, I do think it's very problematic that you cannot teach that that you could have unconscious racism. Yeah, well, I think that's very
This is why I don't like that. You know, the Oklahoma State, they actually put out some pretty good guidelines where they kind of go over all these various things. And when they talk about the unconscious bias part, they say, this is the example they give, is they say it's acceptable to teach that stereotypes and xenophobia do exist and can lead to harmful consequences. But it's not acceptable to teach students that people of a specific race are always racist, regardless of whether they're aware of their racist assumptions and acts because of unconscious bias. And to me, you know, I understand that that's a part of, you know, some ideologies is the fact that we're all kind of operating on these unconscious biases. Personally, I don't think it's helpful or useful to conceptualize this, because the way this basically breaks down is that whenever someone's having an argument about whether something is racist or offensive, the person will basically fall back on, well, you can't see it because of your skin color. This is your unconscious bias.
No, bruh, it's not because of your color. It's because you grow up in a society with unspoken assumptions. Plus, no one is saying anything is inherent to any group. If colonization near happened and we didn't live in a white supremacist society, I don't think white people would have that unconscious bias necessarily. Yeah, it's a social construction. So, you know, I mean, that's but you can see, like, if they're making the law is to prevent something from getting taught, right? And if they're not teaching an inherent immutable bias, then, you know, or if they're not targeting, you know, if that's not apparent, then what are they going to call that, right? And I think the most likely thing is like a discussion of unconscious bias, right? And you can see it with Sitch and Adam, right? They're saying, wait, there's nothing to worry about unless you really want people to be taught that there's an inherent immutable bias, you know, just like baked into white people's DNA or something like that, right? And then they're going on and say, well, I don't know. I mean, I kind of think this whole thing about unconscious bias, that sounds a lot like immutable. Yeah, you can see where it's going on. They are gaslighting, my dude. They are gaslighting Sam Seder here.
I have no problem with that not being taught in public schools.
When was this debate? Rebel Communicate asks. 6 days ago. Okay.
Well, I think that is. I think that is problematic. I do think that's problematic. The idea that you're unaware of that your position in society can obscure society's dynamics, I think is a really important thing to teach kids.
Well, I don't think it's not saying that you can't say that there's a potential for unconscious bias. It's saying you can't say that that's inherent, that you inherently have this unconscious bias.
I think it's more than...
What if I said it was in the air we breathe, in the water we drink?
Likely that, I mean, inherent, I don't think it means that it is something that you're born with necessarily, as much as...
Oh my God, there we go. I told you. Adam and Sitch are so squirmy. Yeah.
What do you call it? A trait?
Yeah, and my concern is that, like, I'm not sure that Sam knows what he's walking into, right? I'm not sure if Sam's knows what he signed up for here.
Function that you are born into, I should say, right? Like, you are acculturated as a white person to a certain status in society that not necessarily, I mean,
look, and if you think that Adam's got like a glazed, uncomprehending like look on his face, just imagine the expressions of their chat, right? None of this is getting through. That's the problem, right? When you're in a debate and you're forced in a position where you have to teach a concept that your audience is unaware of, like, that is a bad place to be, right? Think of Innuendo Studios. Think of the alt-right playbook, right? There's a video called Never Play Defense, and they're talking about how the right wing, operates, right? And how people on the left and people on the right grok or understand or put together, a debate differently, right? On the left, we're looking for, the conclusions following the premises and stuff like that. We're looking for, the logical processes. We're, looking for, whether what somebody's saying is factual, etc., right? That's what tells us who won the debate. On the right, though, they're looking at postures, right? And a winning posture for the right, in other words, for Sitch and Adam's audience, right? A winning posture is a posture that says everything in a confident, quippy way, right? And so the second that you're caught explaining something, you are losing the debate from their perspective. You're back on your heels, right? You're explaining something, right? So that's why, this sort of education is just coming in a place where it's not going to do any good, right? If you have to educate the audience during a debate with right-wingers, you're losing to that audience, right? And that's the only audience that's here, right? Like I said before, Sam's not streaming this. This isn't going up on, as far as I know, it didn't go up on Sam's channel, right? This is an exclusive for Sitch and Adam's audience, right? And they are seeing Sam flailing here, even though he's the one that's making sense. He's the one that knows what he's talking about. He's the one with the correct definitions of stuff, right? None of that's getting through to the right wing. Never play defense.
You could argue also, statistically speaking, that you're born into it because you're going to be more likely in a better hospital. Your chances of your mother dying during childbirth are less. There's a whole host of things that are predetermined as you're born that can be measured by your skin color. That's just a reality.
I think when we're talking
I don't know how
about,
you even begin to deny that.
I think when we're talking about public schools, that we have to understand that there's a lot of people in this country. The public schools are supposed to be basically something for everyone, and the concept of the unconscious bias and that we're all living in white supremacy and all these things. That's a content.
Literally, my dude is saying that white people are excluded from a public school that's teaching about implicit bias, right? No, white people are the ones who need to learn this stuff, right? Most of all, they're the vector of the transmission of of racism, which manifests through unconscious bias. And when you take that unconscious bias and you make it conscious, you give people a chance at least to be aware enough of what's going on that they're not going to transmit that. Because we're not talking about racist, foaming at the mouth KKK people here, right? You're talking about people that think of themselves as good people, as not being racist, but yet they've still internalized a certain amount of white supremacy without being aware of it. What is your beef with making those people trying to bring that to consciousness during social studies class, during history class, right? This, I think school's the perfect venue for this, right? Look, if this stuff got taught in school, your audience might actually know what Sam's trying to say. It might not actually go off over the top of the head like it is, right? This might be a more productive discussion, in other words, right? If this kind of stuff got, this is the kind of stuff that if you're serious about working towards a less racist future, that it's got to be part of the curriculum. And Oklahoma literally just outlawed it. DeSantis is calling it CRT and making it illegal. They're threatening people's teaching licenses, right? And they don't even know what's going to be considered beyond the pale. What's going to get your license pulled? So if you're that teacher, you're going to stay well away from any discussion of implicit bias. And the beat goes on and racism continues, right? That's literally what they're arguing for. Perpetuating racism.
a topic. It's a very contentious opinion that a lot of people in this country don't.
You learned about unconscious bias from Roseanne in the 90s. They didn't call it that back then, which is probably why she didn't set fire to anything in a rage. Yeah, I mean, like, it's a funny thing about Roseanne is, like, my understanding of her sitcom was very differently politically oriented to the Roseanne Barr as a comedian in this time.
Don't even agree with, and I don't see a problem that public schools.
Yeah, right. Adadak, if I'm a teacher, I'm applying for jobs in a different state.
Not going to teach something that is
too risky,
politically motivated in one direction in that fashion.
I know
that's your living, right? That's how you pay for to live, right? That's like
you said that,
and I don't see how that leads to like the downfall of our society to some kind of
I disagree. And because
you think that one concept is
I don't
think
think
the Confederacy.
What you're saying is misinformation any more than my expressing the opposite opinion is misinformation. You can disagree with my opinion, and people can assess based upon the way that we've argued about it.
If you talked about the Oklahoma law,
Sam's employees are probably cringing right now seeing this debate.
And you said, I disagree with this aspect.
He did talk about the debate, right? Like, I don't think it got made into a segment, but I did see Sitch and Adam putting up their response to Sam's discussion of this debate. So
I think the entire
let him finish that.
If you talked about the Oklahoma anti-CRT bill and you said, I think that this part of it is wrong, I think you should be able to teach that there's unconscious racism or whatever. That's not misinformation. That's fine. The misinformation element to me, and the problem with it, is that when you misinterpret, whether intentionally or unintentionally, and you only play half of the guy's answer, and you make it sound like, oh, this guy is trying to hide up the Tulsa race massacre, and then you use that to say that Oklahoma is like, engaged in lost causism, and this is some kind of white supremacy. I mean, that's just,
I think
that is clearly not true.
The very act of proposing and passing anti-CRT laws is in fact part of a white supremacist project, and one that is akin, obviously we're in a different era, but akin to the lost cause. Yes. I mean, the guy who developed the whole thing, Rufo himself, more or less articulated stuff like that back
he didn't say it was
on
a lost
Twitter.
Cause. What do you mean?
No, he didn't say it was a lost cause, but he said, like, we're just going to put out these words and we're going to make it a boogeyman. And it's almost like it is, like I say, eerily reminiscent of Lee Atwater's. We can't say the N-word anymore. But we say these other things.
Sam, this makes all kinds of sense to your audience, right? I know what Sam's talking about. Lee Atwater famously talked about the Southern strategy and the way that it was used post civil rights bill, right? That, like, in the in the 60s and 50s, you could be openly racist, right? You could be openly you could be pro-segregation, and then that's what the people who were against the civil rights bill did, right? But in the 70s, you get in trouble for that, right? So he put it very crudely, but he's literally like, you can say N-word, 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 back in the day, but that doesn't work anymore. So now you got to say busing, now you got to say welfare, now you got to say all these code words that are not explicitly like racist in their literal sense, but that to a racist white voter are dog whistles, essentially, right? So we know that. I mean, like a lot of you have probably heard of Lee Atwater before. If you're not, you understand the concept of dog whistles and you know what he's talking about. I think this is lost on Sitch and Adam's audience. I don't think there's anybody out there that's even understanding the words that are coming out of Sam Seder's mouth here. Yeah.
That are coded and signify and hit the same buttons. And that's exactly what I think it is.
Sam, before we move past this, I just want to get this clear, because do you think we can fight racism? Like I'm against racism, and I
feel like you're the one who doesn't think that we can fight racism, right? Like yeah. The laws that you're signing off on are preventing the unconscious processes that harbor racism from becoming conscious. And that is the first step. That is the first step to being able to unwind it. Because like I said, racism that marches down the street with a tiki torch is very easy to identify. The entire country said, when they saw the people in Charlottesville say, we do not want this. This is not, no, bad, right? That was very easy to identify, right? When they literally walk down the street shouting anti-Semitic slogans like that racism is really easy to identify. The racism that isn't easy to identify is the the racism that like kind of hides itself in our unconscious. So talking about unconscious bias is the prerequisite to being able to do something about racism. Yeah, no, this is ironic.
You know, I'm an old school liberal. I believe in, you know, trying to get a colorblind society where people are, you know, as Martin Luther King always says, judged by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. But what you're saying with the unconscious bias stuff, it makes me wonder, you know, if that's even a possibility in your estimation.
I mean,
so you can see that he's taking unconscious bias as meaning. So this is like, right, he said there's no problem, right? Because the only thing you're not allowed to teach is that like that racism is like inherent, or it's oh god, I can't remember, immutable. Yeah, it was the word that they used, right? Like that's the only thing that like they're disallowing the teaching of. But Sam's literally talking about like taking the unconscious you know, bias and making it conscious, and he's responding with, oh, okay, so you think it's immutable. So like you're showing me right there that you can't disambiguate argument A, it's immutable, it's inherent, like, you know, to my phenotype of you know, my skin, right? Versus what Sam is saying, which is that it is unconscious, right? You're confusing those two concepts. What am I supposed to think? How am I supposed to imagine that that's going to operate as a law, right? If I'm seeing somebody that's actually not that far down the line as far as being a conservative, right? This is IDW. These aren't MAGA chuds. These aren't, you know, like, right? They're not like they're not like crypto fash DeSantis voters or something like that, right? You know, this is conservative light here, right? And even he's confusing it, right? He's saying, well, what I hear you saying, Sam, is that it's immutable and it's inherent, right? So therefore, it's against the law to teach in Oklahoma. And like I said, with the confusion inherent in this, in the way this is written, the way that a teacher is going to respond to this, because the teacher, their license, their livelihood is on the line. So it sets up kind of a, you know, in the way the metaphor of the Panopticon, where we end up surveilling ourselves in the Panopticon, because we know that at any time somebody could be watching. So we're like, oh, I better not even do anything that's going to come close to being like against the rules, right? If you aren't entirely sure if teaching unconscious bias as a concept, trying to make people aware that this can happen, is going to be taken like you're taking it as being teaching that it's immutable and inherent bias, then it's not safe for you to teach it as a teacher, right? Like you, by hook or by crook, you're making the kind of instruction that might eventually wind down racism as a phenomenon. You're making it so that can't be taught.
Know if we can ever get to the point where people don't have, you know, unconscious biases. I don't know if we can ever get to that.
Yeah, like Natalie, you could be right. I don't know what's in Adam Friend's heart, right? But you definitely are seeing him conflating two very, what in my mind and in Sam's mind, are two very different ideas as being the same one, and thereby, you know, like it feels like you're making it illegal to teach about unconscious bias.
I am more concerned with dealing with the implications of those biases first.
Right. So you do think we should fight racism? And
by passing these, you know, so-called anti-CRT laws.
Yeah. Was that a confusion? Like, do you think we should fight racism? No. Sam's like a big fan of racism. That's like literally straw manning him in the worst way possible. Putting words in his mouth that more properly fit in your own mouth, right? That is, whoever said that these dudes were weasels, a little bit weaselly, a little bit wiggly, a little bit slippery, you are right. And chat, you have my full permission to post weasels in chat, but understand that you'll only be able to post weasels in chat if you're a sub on Twitch or on YouTube. You have access to those emotes. Go check them out right now. Post some weasels in chat if you can.
Elementary school kids. The whole act, in my mind, is a way to obscure the reality of things like I just described. That it's significantly hotter in black people's neighborhoods. That the tax code, though it wasn't written necessarily to discriminate against black people, does discriminate against black people because of the relationship between the tax code and having political power.
This is where we completely disagree, because like I said, in the first of the clip, he says, we should teach the good, the bad, and the ugly. You know, we have made mistakes as a nation and we shouldn't try to hide that. He literally says, We've had times in our past where we haven't lived up.
We had some oopsies in our past, and I don't know, maybe some racism might have happened, and that's so unfortunate because clearly, like, that's the exception and not the rule. Oh my God, this is so hard to listen to.
Our principles. So in the context of this bill, they're talking about teaching all of the things that you're talking about. That
I don't think they care about the topic when they weasel their work backwards from the conclusions. Yeah.
So we're not going to look. Obviously we're going to disagree on this. But I think if you watch the context of the first clip, it's crystal clear that he's saying that we need to teach all of these things, and I think it's a mischaracterization to say that he's not.
What is going on in their chat? I don't even understand. These must be some right-wing memes that like some IDW memes that I don't even get. What, like, I don't even know. I'm scared to read what I'm seeing in chat right now because it might be a dog whistle. Has anybody heard, like, okay, I'm gonna say what I'm seeing here. Somebody in chat saying communist skin suit. What does that mean? What does that chatter say? Like, see what I mean? I'm like, I don't know what that, like, I'm afraid to even read that out, right? Because I'm afraid it's like some kind of dog whistle or something. What does that mean?
His words, we have a disagreement on how to.
Their emotes are like a hammer and sickle with like a Ghostbusters sign over it, right? We got weasels. We got some good emotes here.
Interpret his words. I also think the context in which in support of the anti-CRT legislation is without a doubt in my mind.
That sounds sus as
part of a campaign that is akin. It's not obviously the lost cause because this is he's not Dunning and that's not we're teaching history, but it is akin to the same type of project, which is to obscure racism.
Oh my God, this is depressing.
Racism that exists in our society.
The problem I have with this is that, and I sent you a link to the bill if you want to look at it. It's pretty short. That has the concepts that you're not supposed to teach.
It's going to launch.
The PDF file. But what I just want to say is that it doesn't say, there's nothing in there that says you can't teach about.
Sam doesn't even identify. Yeah, no, Sam is progressive liberal, like as far as I've ever heard him say. I mean, you get a sense that he's like, obviously the people that he hires, a lot of them are on would be on like the socialist leftist side of things, but yeah, he himself is
systemic injustices in society. There's nothing.
Never really identified that way.
What is CRT?
Well, hold on a second. The bill doesn't even say you can't teach CRT either. It says you can't teach these specific concepts. And when we were going through those specific concepts, and so that's why it's hard for me to draw the kind of extreme conclusions you're drawing from it.
You want me to read this?
We did no, Sitch. Stop sending Sam links. Sam, we want you to focus. He's trying to make an argument here.
Well, here's
Adam said he was a lefty from way back. Wait,
it's just going to repeat itself.
No, he's like a Democrat from way back, Crystal. He's like a Democrat from back in. You know what I mean?
Because of this disconnect about what these CRT laws mean, essentially. Because the other part of the conversation
from the pre-civil rights era, I don't know.
I think that there's.
Okay, wait a second. Hold on. One part you didn't read. This is G of that law.
Why did you send him the links?
No teacher. Well, because he's trying to make an argument that I am misinforming people, and so it would be.
Well, I started to read that.
Well, we have like 15. We have like 15 minutes. Now we're going to read every bill.
No teacher, administrator, or other employee of a school district, charter school, et cetera, shall require or make part of a course the following concepts. That any individual, and it doesn't even like it actually is like just poor English here. Any individual should feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or any other form of psychological distress on account of his or her race or sex. And it's not clear that they're teaching that someone is obligated to feel this. The way this is written, frankly, and I say this as somebody who was raised by a contracts lawyer, is that should one feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or any other form of psychological distress on account of his or her race or sex is not necessarily something that's controlled by the teacher.
Well, no, it is. It says
should.
Is it? It says should. That's what should means.
That any individual should feel.
Should, yeah.
Discomfort, but how do you should feel discomfort?
It's saying a teacher cannot teach that students should feel. Okay.
Say to me in a sentence, you should feel discomfort.
You just said it, Sam.
No.
You should feel discomfort. You
No,
should feel. You should feel uncomfortable about this, Sam.
This is like a way in which someone who comes in and says,
I just did what you said.
Okay, I understand.
Right.
This is a way for a parent who doesn't like the idea of their child to be taught that
Adam said he was a conservative when he debated Hassan a few years back.
white people attack.
Yo, I mean, like look at Dave Rubin, right? If you want to see an example of this, right? And this is, this is pertinent to my video essay. Dave Rubin tried to rewrite his own history, right? Dave Rubin was always conservative. He was the most conservative member of TYT. His role on TYT was kind of as a conservative foil, but it doesn't work for the narrative that he wanted to portray, which was a narrative that like he was a liberal, but then he was red-pilled, he was awakened, he woke up to the fact that liberalism is really evil and like it's going off the rails. The liberals today, they're just too extreme, and so he had to be true to his own values, right? As a classical liberal, he might seem to be lining up more with conservatives, but trust me, it's because the liberals are unhinged, right? It's not Dave. He tried to rewrite his own history, right? And Sam caught him on that. And Sam busted him on that. And Sam did countless videos on Dave Rubin, hammering home who he really was, what game he was playing, and why that wasn't true, right? And that's what got Sam, kind of blacklisted out of, like out of being able to appear on a lot of shows. You can see, you'll see in this video Tim Pool talking about that, kind of, gloating about getting, being part of that effort to deplatform Sam after all of his talk about free speech, right? But Dave Rubin's a good example of this kind of game that the IDW plays, right? It's not enough for them to be, to kind of be sort of crypto right wingers, right? They've also got to claim a political ideology that is far to the left of the one that they actually represent, thereby just hacking, I don't know what else to say, but hacking the Overton window. The Overton window is the the realm of acceptable discourse, right? So what normal people talk about. This is as far liberal as liberal. This is as far to the left as you can go. This is as far as to the right you can go. And when you claim to be over here on the left, but you're actually saying right-wing stuff, you're just kind of pulling that center over to the right, which is, if you're a right winger, that's what you want to do. But of course, if you're in the IDW, you're not going to say that you're a right winger. You're going to say you're the last true liberal or whatever, right? It's the same game that they play.
Black people, and specifically to disempower them.
Do you think that teachers should be able to teach that because your kid is white, they should feel bad about, white?
Do you think under this law, a teacher could teach something that would make someone feel discomfort, guilt, or anguish? You think they can under this law?
Yeah.
I think that is not the way this is going to.
What are you doing
wait,
here?
stop, Adams, please stop. Okay, I sent you the Oklahoma State School Board Association guideline, and they talk about this, and they literally say they talk about this. If you want to look on it, it's on page 4, right at the top. They talk about this specific part of the CRT bill, and they say teachers cannot teach that students should feel discomfort, guilt, or anguish because of their race. And then right under it, it says acceptable. Teaching about the facts of history, sociology, etc., even if students have certain...
This segment is called Can America Ever Be Colorblind? You can see what the goal is for these people, right? Not to do anything about racism, but to get really good at ignoring it.
Feelings about what they are learning. This is not within a teacher's control, nor is prohibited by this part of the statute. The prohibition is of teachers informing students that they should feel distressed because of their race or sex. So to me, it's very clear that what this law is saying is that a teacher should not tell a student that because they're white, they should feel a certain way. It doesn't say that you can't teach about racism, you can't show your kid roots, and if they feel weird or bad about it, that means that it's illegal.
I think that in practice, this law will inhibit people from teaching these things. We've seen it time and time again. That's why we have seen it in the context, certainly within the context of Florida. And we see it like the way that it works when you're talking about library books being pulled. The law doesn't call for these library books to be pulled, but they do so because there is a strong incentive to err on the side of not bringing these things up. There's no teacher who's going to want to go into a classroom and
I'm seeing Groyper avatars in chat, right?
afoul of these laws.
These people don't worry though; they're not heavily right wing or anything.
They're going to stay way clear of it, and that is the purpose.
They have to.
That is the.
No, I'm sure the groypers are just literally channel members, right? Literally paying members of the Adam and Sitch audience, right? And there's a groyper in there paying them. There's a groyper that finds value in this in their stream, right?
Purpose of these.
Oh my God!
Bills. I mean, it is the purpose of these bills, because.
No, this is hard. I might have to cut this stream short. I'm seeing them getting paid for being a bastion of racism, and
the idea that there was
it just kind of hurts, honestly.
Teaching of stuff, where elementary school kids were being told in Oklahoma schools that they are should be feeling.
Don't worry, Chad. I'm not going to pull an Anna Kasparian.
It's just not there. It's the same way that when Oklahoma, or I don't know if it was Oklahoma or Nebraska, passing anti-Sharia laws. I mean, back in the aughts.
Well, okay,
it's a similar dynamic.
There's two issues. The first is that even in Oklahoma and even in Florida, the standards say that they have to teach about slavery. They have to teach about all these other things. So it's not like the teachers can avoid to talk about these subjects the way that you're afraid they will be. That's number one. And then number two,
Just let him finish, Sam. Let him finish.
You bring up the books thing, and that, to me, the books thing actually proves my point.
There we go. Ad break. I tried to warn.
And all this other stuff, and yet these CRT bills have been on the books for a year or 2 years in some states, and we haven't heard of any curriculum.
Just let people know that the ad break's coming up, and let them know how to get out of that, and
any evidence of parents coming in and complaining about the teachings of slavery or any of that effect. It hasn't happened to my knowledge.
I am not.
I mean, it would be a big story. I would assume you would have heard about it because you'd want to report about it. And say, we got him. We got DeSantis.
To be honest with you, I don't even remember the video you're talking about. I mean, so I can't say off the top of my head. We've been having a conversation for an hour about a video that I have no recollection about. So
yeah, but that to me is that's part of the problem. I mean, because the other
thing
I
do too much content.
Well, no, the part of the problem is that when you're looking at these, as you said, we've been having an hour-long conversation about trying to interpret someone's words and interpret these laws, and that whether it can be interpreted in multiple ways and whether it's really that bad. And to me, when you label these things like establishing the neo-Confederacy or lost causism, or in another video you talked about how these are the incremental steps to fascism, when you use this like very strong language for these sorts of things, I mean, you're basically, in my mind, you're setting up people to view this like they need to use violent solutions to solve these kinds of problems.
I've never, ever suggested that people.
No, I know that you haven't directly suggested that, but I'm saying that by using this language, you're basically.
Wait a second. You're telling me that you've just spent an hour on one video that I did. I don't know how many months ago. Or was it a year ago or whatever?
Somebody just paid them €6 to say, "I want to have Sitch's children. If someone could send them." Oh God. This is depressing. I don't know how much more of this I can take, chat, honestly.
This was a couple weeks ago.
And this was a couple of weeks ago?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're telling me you just spent an hour taking issue with my interpretation of this guy advocating for this law, with the idea that, what happened in the Oklahoma race massacre was a question of bad actions by individuals. And you're telling me that is misinformation. But you're saying that because I say these are, and I've said this, I think, quite often, that I don't know if this is fascism as much as it is steps that are necessary, incremental steps towards fascism, that I'm inciting violence?
I said, so, and you even said this, I don't know when you upload your show versus when you do it. You had
Okay, this is going to get really interesting now.
Clips just like the day before yesterday, where you were talking about the anti-CRT laws in Florida being the incremental steps to fascism. And as you said, you've said this several times. This is a repeated theme of your show. And I'm saying that this is,
and so you're interpreting that as a call to violence?
No, I'm not interpreting you as saying this is a call to violence. What I'm saying is that if you paint this picture, no, I'm saying if you paint this picture in your audience's mind that we're teetering on the edge of fascism, okay? If you were to tell me, Sitch, we're teetering on the edge of white supremacy and fascism, okay? I think it's reasonable that a reasonable person hearing that and believing that would say, I need to use violence to prevent my country from going to fascism.
So Sam's doing stochastic violence by pointing out the Christo-fascist movement within this country, which has been cooking for a long time, right? When you hear about dominionism, I think they got like call it like Seven Mountains dominionism or something like that, right? like we're talking about Christofascism. When you talk about like Matt Walsh, right? There are so many ways in like look, Michael Knowles isn't even being like, coy about it anymore. He's straight up saying it. Seven Mountain Mandate. Yeah. Like, right. But like for Sam to point this out, that this is going on, Sam's the one doing stochastic violence. For wanting to teach about unconscious bias in schools, according to this shitty chat, this groiped up chat here that they've got, that is teaching racism in schools, right? Unconscious bias, like being aware of that phenomenon, that's racist. That's racist against white people. This is hard to deal with, right?
Kind of setting people up.
I don't know who you're hanging out with.
I literally do not get paid enough to deal with this.
But no, I don't see how would violence.
Wait, if I told you, if you believed that the country was teetering on fascism, you don't think it would be justified to use violence to prevent that?
I don't think it would be effective. I don't think one individual perpetrating
Well, I said justified,
violence,
not effective. I said justified.
Well, I wouldn't advocate it. No, and
I know.
don't,
I'm saying, do you think it would be justified for if someone thinks, or actually, I should say justified? Do you think it'd be reasonable? Do you think it'd be reasonable that a reasonable person?
Sitch's kids, they have female fans. Sitch's avatar is literally, yeah. I mean, I guess so, right? That's
would try to use violence to stop the country from.
No, I don't think it'd be reasonable because I can't possibly.
Well, not only that, but he's getting paid €6.
Think of like how an individual's act of violence is going to stop fascism.
Yeah, but
how would that happen?
I know that you don't, but other people do.
Well, but you're saying reasonable, and you explain to me how that would happen. If it's a reasonable concept, it's easy for you to explain to me.
Yeah, because if someone says, "Okay, my country is literally teetering on fascism," and so I'm trying to vote. I'm trying to vote.
What's your reasonable action that you're going to take?
I'm trying to explain it to you. If someone says my country's teetering on fascism and white supremacy, and I'm going out there and I'm voting, and it's not making a difference, okay, I need to go out with my friends. We need to organize some kind of violent resistance underground movement, or we're going to get guns. We're going to go after people. We're going to start blowing up buildings. We're going to fight against the fascists.
Who are you going to blow up and go after?
They could go after the governor. They could go after the state legislatures. What do you mean? They start burning down these buildings. They could start kidnapping these people. I mean, there's literally, remember, there's a plot to kidnap the governor like not that long ago.
Let me just be clear. You think it's a reasonable action for people to fight fascism by assassinating a governor of the state of Oklahoma or something?
Do you think it would have been reasonable for people to assassinate Hitler before
Ron DeSantis finally admits that Trump lost the 2020 election? Oh, wow.
Rose to power?
I don't know how you would anticipate that he was going to do that.
I don't know who he's targeting anymore.
You could read Mein Kampf in his prison cell. When he wrote in his prison cell about how if you're Jewish in Germany and Hitler's rising to power and you read Mein Kampf, you'd be like, holy shit, I got to get this guy to power.
In retrospect,
I'm not even in retrospect, preemptively.
Well, I obviously I don't think anybody even contemplated doing that before he rose to power. I mean,
I don't think
know
they
what your
expected
standard
him to rise to power. But I'm saying now, especially now with that
that's
context.
my point.
Yeah, but now it's even worse because now you have the context of Hitler. Now you have the context of fascism, which is why you're kind of invoking fascism in this conversation.
Do you see what they're doing? They're accusing Sam of crying wolf. They're saying that like he's blowing the whistle on fascism where it doesn't exist. People are being completely, reasonable, and that this law that they're making in Oklahoma is actually banning racism from the classrooms, not enabling it. Right? Banning racism because like acknowledging that unconscious bias is a thing is in and of itself racist. Right? That's
when you talk about these topics.
They are sitting there with like super chats on their screen, getting paid a lot of money to just straight up gaslight the fuck out of people, right? Accuse Sam of being a stochastic terrorist. Meanwhile, I am sitting here.
No, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, if you think it's reasonable for someone to go out and that it's a reasonable concept for people to
I think a reasonable person could come to that conclusion that it's reasonable to fight fascism with violence.
I disagree.
So you think all the Antifa people are crazy and unreasonable?
I don't think the Antifa...
Yo, like here's the thing though, right? Who's got bodies? Not Antifa, right? Where's the stochastic terrorism coming from? Not the left, right? Sam, like, I hate to say it, but you're being used to cut propaganda, okay? I know, like, look, I'm not, this isn't me getting mad at Sam or blaming Sam or, anything like that, right? God, like...
Antifa people are going out and trying to assassinate anybody.
No, but they believe that they are justified in using violence to stop fascism. They definitely
I think
they believe that they are justified in using violence to stop fascism. That's why the only thing you can point to is Richard Spencer eating a knuckle sandwich, right?
literally go out and try and defend, put themselves between people for the most part. My understanding of what Antifa does is they get in between fascists and the people that fascists are attacking. That's different than going out and assassinating political figures. There's never been anything.
Cornel West talks about this in Charlottesville. Like Cornel West was in Charlottesville, was marching, and literally attributes anti-fascist to the fact that he didn't get hurt in that incident. And if you want to talk about people that got hurt in Charlottesville, there is video of somebody getting hit with like crowbars and stuff, like a black guy in a garage there being, I guess all YouTube will let me say is harmed, right? But yeah, grossly harmed, right? And there were people that showed up to try to get in between the targets of these hate groups and the hate groups, right? That's what, that's the kind of anti-fascist action you tend to see in the United States, right?
Remotely like that, as far as I'm aware of.
Well, first of all, there was the Gavin Long situation where he literally was listening to Jimmy Dore and other people like that, talk about how we live in this white supremacy society, and it definitely motivated him.
Yo, Jimmy Dore talk about how we live in a white supremacist society? Show me that fucking clip. I don't think this guy knows Jimmy Dore, right? Jimmy Dore talks to Boogaloo Boys. What are you talking about?
Pretty directly to go out and start assassinating police officers.
My God.
So that did happen. This isn't like something that's never happened before, number one. And number two,
this hurts.
The reason why I'm surprised you say this is because
I am in pain. I am in agony. I am in anguish.
To defend Jimmy Dore?
No, I don't want to defend Jimmy Dore. But I'm just saying that there's a track record for something like this happening. But number two, you literally the other day
the same rhetoric as Jimmy Dore does. I think people are
when you talk about incremental steps of fascism, I mean, you literally had the other day someone call into your show and say, Sam, I listened to your show a lot, and I feel like it's time for the left to start advocating for violence. That happened on your show like 2 days ago.
He's reacting to the news, and I specifically said, don't do that.
You said, well, first of all, it's a very weird conversation because you said let me bring up exactly what you said.
And we should be clear, I have open phone lines. So it's not somebody I invited.
Well, what did he think he was stepping into? What did he think that he was dealing with? Like, what did he think that he was doing here, right? Like, this is a trap. This is an ambush, right? They pick a clip from your show, they ask you to defend it, right? And now they're talking about a caller on an open phone line, right? Who called in concerned about the rising tide of fascism in this country. And Sam said, I don't think violence is the answer, right? No, this is too damn depressing.
No, I understand that there needs to be some type of violent response, which that's not exactly what I would say.
What if they had someone call in and what if they had someone call in and advocate violence?
But then after it, you did say that you practically didn't think violence would bring about change in a positive way. But you didn't really talk about like a moral condemnation of it. You didn't call the man crazy or unreasonable or anything of that nature. You just said, well, I don't think it'll work practically.
I agree. I don't think it would work practically. I don't think a reasonable person would.
But morally, you don't have a problem with it?
No, I don't find it like my morality is just not something that I necessarily talk about. I don't have to justify my morality to you. You're talking about me advocating violence, and I'm not. You just quoted
I didn't say you advocated for violence.
I don't think a reasonable person would.
I never said you advocated for violence. What I said is that your rhetoric can lead people down this path, and you had someone who literally called into your show who said,
lead people down this path.
It's not
look, like you're talking about the specter of violence from the left in the face of eliminationist rhetoric from the right, in the face of legislation against trans people in Florida. You're going to tell me that but what we really need to worry about is what if some of these Antifa types out here, what if they get out and they get the wrong idea and they go out and they like, no, please fucking miss me with that shit. Miss me with that shit, right?
It's not my rhetoric. I feel like
we're getting there.
It's not my rhetoric. It is the reality of what we're dealing with in this country.
So when I talk into
about
your show
things,
and says, this is how I feel about things.
One at a time, guys. One of you can talk. Go ahead.
Okay.
Well, Sam, yes. When I'm talking, just as I assume that you are talking about your perception, and I'm talking about my perception.
Right.
And yes, we disagree. You see what's going on. You don't see a problem. I would see what's going on over the course of the past 20 years, and a rise in attacks on marginal people. We just had a guy got.
And again, Sam, you're talking to an audience who this information that we all have seen, that we all know, is hidden from these people. These people never see this stuff. When you say, like, a hate crime, these people are thinking Jussie Smollett, okay? These people are thinking something that doesn't really happen. And then they're like, oh, but what about the professor with the bike lock? Remember that guy? Oh my God, you have to dig so deep. Like, what about... What about Big Red? Didn't she beat somebody up? Yeah, I remember her kicking the shit out of those MRAs on, like, you know what I mean? They really have to dig to find some kind of like specter, like to drop a, like, oh my God, Antifa is gonna come and they're gonna eat our babies or something. I don't know. Like, this is like right. We all know what's really happening in this country. This audience doesn't know that stuff. They don't have any interest in hearing about this, and they're not being taught about this. They're not being told about this, right? This is not something that Sitch and Adam would ever fucking cover. So they're sitting out here thinking the real danger is a professor with a bike lock. They're going to come and clock you over the head in a protest or something, like, right?
To death in Brooklyn the other night because he was gay. I see this resurgence of homophobia. I see this resurgence of transphobia. I see this backlash against CRT, a thing that vast majority of people who,
Yeah, Kat, I'm surprised they didn't go back to the congressional baseball game.
Want to get rid of it, can't even define, but they think that it's associated with, in some way.
Well, that was like literally like 2010 or something, wasn't
black
it?
People being emancipated. I see.
Just say they're bloodthirsty would be an understatement. Yep.
Pundits who are making a ton of cash off of attacking trans people and gay people, some of the most marginalized people in our society. And yes, I find it alarming.
LOL, transphobic resurgence. That's literally what the chat is saying. They're making a joke of shit that's really happened. We're in a really bad place, and these chuckleheads are laughing about it.
And I find it a step towards fascism. I think what DeSantis is doing with his like relentless talk of woke ideology, which is a sort of like this blanket term, which in my estimation, again, my perception, my opinion, if people think this is misinformation,
God, I gotta stop saying.
They have a blinkered notion.
They're trying to avoid saying the F word.
What misinformation is.
YouTube wants a happy streamer.
That is supposed to basically
I'm gonna be happy somehow
on racism, which is endemic in this country. And it has been endemic in this country for, I mean, arguably maybe endemic in this country, since its founding. And at different times, it can be exacerbated in part because of the economic situation, in part because of the demographic situation. And yeah, I think that we are taking incremental steps towards fascism. That's my opinion. It's my perception.
So, well, I feel like you're kind of making my point, is that when you frame all these things in society is basically leading us down to the destruction of our society, to living into.
Well, I didn't say the destruction of our society.
Well, destruction of democracy, I guess, because you're talking about we're going to live under a fascistic rule. I do think it would be reasonable.
My dude is gaslighting us
here. A reasonable person would want to prevent us from living in a fascistic rule if they believe and interpret it the way that you're kind of laying it out. And
I think it's reasonable for people not to want the country to be fascist, but that doesn't mean it's reasonable for them to think that assassinating a governor is going to inhibit that.
It's interesting because not only did you have this guy call in and literally.
No, I didn't have.
God, never play defense. That's what's going on right now, right? This is, if you're in this situation in a debate, particularly when your audience is exclusively right wing, this is not a victory, right? This is not.
Okay, I'm sorry. A guy called into your show. Okay.
Yes.
Did a guy call into your show? And he was saying that he thinks the left should start advocating for violence, and he was saying that he thought revolutions were only successful with violence. And after that guy said that, you read a message. You had, I don't know how you have some sort of like messages come in, and you read it out. And I don't think you knew what the guy meant, because the message said, hey, caller, you should read Nelson Mandela's speech that he gave as a closing statement to his trial. Do you know what speech he's talking about?
Famous anti-white racist Nelson Mandela. That is what he's saying, right?
Talking about?
Tell us.
No, I'm not.
He's talking about something that Nelson Mandela said before he went to prison. Look, right-wingers, up until the end of apartheid, were calling Nelson Mandela a dangerous communist. Now, if you've read the shock doctrine, you'd know that the ANC, if there's any issue with the ANC, it's that maybe they didn't go hard enough, and that when apartheid was wound down, they had like neoliberals, they had Chicago boys, they had like literal people from the Chicago School of Economics, like kind of advising them on how to run the post-apartheid economy, right? And that allowed racism and the hierarchy that apartheid had established to kind of institutionalize itself in the form of the economy, right? So
the speech that the message that
I mean, this is gross. This is like, like I said, like these guys are pretending like, oh, we're not even that far right wing, right? And yeah, you're not MAGA chuds. And Adam Friend had said something about MMT. You can find examples of stuff that's like just not characteristic about of like super hardcore reactionaries on the right. But at the same time, you're getting this dude saying Nelson Mandela is a violent and dangerous anti-white racist communist, right? That's what Sitch is saying here.
Red was talking about is it's called the I'm prepared to die speech. And it's Nelson Mandela talking exactly about how his movement tried to use nonviolence to fight oppression and to get the political change they want, and it didn't work. So now him and his movement is completely morally justified to use violence to get what they want.
I don't think that we have come anywhere close as a society to exhausting civil disobedience. I don't even think we've come.
I'm glad. I'm very glad that you say that. But
yo, I bet he thinks Trump is responsible for J6.
People calling your show.
No, clearly it was Antifa and George Soros and the feds. Yes, the feds that did Gen 6. That's who's. Oh my God! I can't take this.
But I would not in any way look at your comment section here on YouTube, pick one out, and hold you responsible for a comment section specifically based upon the idea that you're saying like, I disagree that the country is going fascist, therefore a reasonable person would go out and assassinate an Antifa person or something like that. I don't know what to tell you. You're really interested in claiming that despite the fact that I specifically said to this individual, I don't think that violence is the answer. And despite the fact that I have said very often on the show, and just the idea that, it's not just me saying this about, there are academics who believe that we are on the verge of fascism, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, this is not a wild-eyed fantastical idea.
Like if Sam is erring on any side, it's the sign of not being alarmist enough, rather than being like the purveyor of stochastic violence. That's what these guys are saying. You're stoking stochastic violence, Sam, by making up these ideas like that we're under some kind of a crypto, like some kind of Christo-fascist movement in this country to, like, literally Trump is talking about like rolling up democracy if he gets elected again. where do you think we're at, right?
I've been doing this for 20 years.
You got DeSantis and Trump promising transgenocide. You got Michael Knowles and Matt Walsh saying the same thing,
and
right?
Until recently, I think that like there is we
are being gaslit so hard. And yes, Chad, I know gaslighting is actually an interpersonal phenomenon that doesn't really, there's a problem with using like clinical language to describe, more societal phenomenon, right? But like I gotta say it in a short, succinct way that'll be understood, right? That we're having smoke blown up our asses by these guys.
Fascist element to this country, and I don't think that a reasonable person would interpret what I've just said on your show, that they should go out and assassinate people. I don't know what to tell you. You keep repeating the same point over and over again, but I'm not going to change my opinion.
Let me just say, I guess, two things to kind of to conclude this, though you can respond, obviously. The first is that, if you were in that video that you uploaded, if you were kind of condemning violence as strongly to the caller and to your audience as you are right here, I would feel very different about this. I just felt you seemed, and people can watch for themselves, I don't know why, you seemed very uncomfortable to take a very strong stance against violence, which now you don't. You seem very, adamant about it, which I appreciate.
Listen, when somebody calls into the show, we get people who call into the show, okay? And when someone is expressing, like, when someone calls in like that, it is, you don't know who this person is. You don't know what their mental state is. You don't know what's going on there. And so I try and be sensitive to, who's there and what's going to be the best way, particularly when someone's starting to express something like those views, the best way to try and sort of unwind them, okay? And there's not many shows that take unscreened phone calls, and there's not many shows that take unscreened IMs. I don't know if there are any.
But you're not a psychologist. You're not just talking to this guy. You're talking to
I know I'm
audience.
not a psychologist.
Right.
Exactly.
So that's what I mean. You're talking to an audience. And to me, the audience takes away from it is more important.
And so I'm just doing in that moment what I think is the most responsible thing I can do to make sure that that person's bad ideas don't grow and fester. And so if you think
Sam,
that I didn't respond with the
getting put on the defensive on this particular question is immensely harmful, right? Conceding the points that you're conceding here is immensely harmful, right? Like, you're literally being used to cut fascist propaganda, and that fucking sucks. All right, I know you love to debate, but please don't walk into an ambush like this ever again. Oh my God, we got another ad break, and I didn't even warn you this time because I got so distracted by how bad this debate is going.
With the proper sort of like emotion or whatever it is, you know, to this call, I don't know what to tell you. Don't watch the show.
Okay. Well, I'm glad, you said that you wouldn't pick out a comment from our comment section and paint our show with it, which I appreciate because we do have, crazy people.
Yeah, you got groiped up people in your fucking chat, and they're your donors. They're giving you money. You're making money off of freaking groipers.
Talk to everyone and comment on their show.
You got a bunch of Nick fans in your audience. You got a bunch of Fuentes fanboys in your audience. Yeah.
So, I mean, but do you think, it's just interesting that you said that because, that caused so much of a controversy for Emma when she did that to Tim Pool. I mean, she picked out that one guy, the shooter, and said that was indicative of Tim
one
Pool's
guy.
audience.
Yeah, she picked out that one. Look, I thought they were gonna say that Emma picked out, found a comment that was like, "Hey, this comment sounds kind of right," No, you're talking about a mass. You're talking about the dude with the fucking the Nazi tattoo. That's who we were talking about. It was a Tim Pool. So somebody that mentioned Tim Pool in his manifesto. God,
I think that
I can't believe that's so disingenuous to hold Tim Pool responsible for that.
I mean, to be totally honest with you, I wasn't terribly familiar with that guy who had. I wasn't terribly familiar with that guy who had,
Wait, was that Ted Cruz? He pulled a Ted Cruz, right? That's like a Ted, was it Ted Cruz? I can't remember. Wait, yeah, it was Ted Cruz, right? I might be misremembering. There was some Republican candidate in 2016 who got nervous and he drank some water, and it just looked really bad. And no,
his screenshots of
no.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't terribly familiar.
Screenshots. You're acting like the contention was there was something not great. It said in chat, and I can't believe it. Emma was so disingenuous as to blame Tim Pool for that. No, Tim Pool showed up in a manifesto. Come on, Tim Pool was cited in a freaking manifesto. Yeah, no.
Case. Do I think that's indicative?
Oh my God.
I think that if you platform, generically speaking, okay, to be fair, because I don't know necessarily the details of that Tim Pool thing. But I think that if you platform, and I know that Tim in the past has at least platformed people that I would consider that way. I think he has Jack Posobiec, co-hosting his shows or something. But if you platform these people without critiquing them in any way, I do think you deserve some responsibility.
I mean, look. Mm-hmm. Realistically speaking, Sam is dehydrated, or he's got he's got a tickle in his throat or something like that. That doesn't really mean anything, right? But the way that this audience reads this stuff, like I said, conservative audiences looking at a debate, they're reading it fully by the posture of the person in that. So this actually is a huge dub for the Sitch and Adam crew, right? This is how this is going to be read. You're encouraged. Oh my God. Look, Sam, if you end up watching, I don't think you will, right? I'm a tiny random small streamer chick here, right? You're a great big political pundit. You're kind of a hero of mine from when I was a lot younger, right? So I don't have any reason to think that you're gonna see this, but if you or anybody on the MR sees this, please understand this, that I'm not mad at Sam I'm frustrated that this happened. I would hope that, you know, this is like a wake-up call of you know, what kind of trap some of these right-wingers, some of these IDW people are trying to pull you into, right? I love you. I love what you do. You know, this is not a condemnation of you or anything. I'm just massively frustrated that they're using you to cut fasci propaganda like this. It sucks.